Hello and welcome back to the NBA DFS Slate Breakdown for Thursday, November 30th. We made it to the end of the month. We got a fun slate. We got 9 games for a Thursday, which is kind of weird during football season, but I'm here for it. So let's dive in. But before we do, come join us at LionStar. Only $39.99 per month gets you access to everything we do. All the props, all the DFS. You get it all, one low price. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe to the video. It helps me out tremendously. Now, let's get into the slate here. So, 9 games. As I said, big news here is that Anthony Edwards is doubtful, and Minnesota still looks like big-time favorites. And I am surprised they're that big of favorites. But all in all, I think the slate is interesting. One fact about it is there's multiple potential blowouts on this slate. So the Bulls are 9-point underdogs. I already said Minnesota. The Spurs are 7.5-point underdogs. The Knicks are 14.5 favorites. The Nets are 8.5 favorites. The Cavs are 12-point favorites. So I think that is one thing that is a little interesting to kind of dissect on this slate. And it might mean that it makes a little bit more sense today to do some sort of game stacks, like a 2-1 or whatnot, and try and get one of those high total games that stays close instead of, is just a blowout and just full on National Blowout Association game. So I think that's one of the things that I'm kind of exploring and working with and going to continue to kind of think about throughout the day that we can use to go at this slate. All right, now let's dive into the slate itself. So point guard, highest owned here on FanDuel. We got Mike Conley, James Harden, and Josh Giddey, then Jalen Brunson. So Conley on FanDuel is just too cheap without Anthony Edwards. He should probably play it a couple extra minutes. His fantasy points per minute goes from like 0.85 to like 0.95. So with the additional minutes and that increase, he just starts to look really good. And I probably will get to a decent amount, even though he is pretty high owned. James Harden, I think, is interesting. He does look better on FanDuel than on DraftKings. On DraftKings, he is 8K. So that's really the common theme what we're seeing with point guards so far is these guys don't look as good on DraftKings. But Harden just went off for 50, had a really good game, now has a good matchup versus the Warriors. Seems like the Clippers are starting to kind of figure it out with Harden. The one thing, though, is, his price is starting to get up there, and he has a big name around him, but he's still only around a point per minute with the Clippers, and makes it a little harder for me to want to eat that chalk on him. Josh Giddey is fine. It is a good matchup. I struggle to play him when SGA plays, though, because he just plays so many more or less minutes. He's averaging around 28 minutes, and we really just need more out of him at 6,100. If he was, getting 32, 34, I would be much more in on him, but I very much worry about his minutes. Brunson's fine. I think Steph Curry is super interesting today. Our projections aren't loving him right now, likely because he hasn't been great this season. The one thing with that I will say is Chris Paul's out. He's been, in the 1.2s for fantasy points per minute. All last year without Chris Paul, he's more like 1.35. So I think without Chris Paul, we're going to see a little boost of his usage and a boost to his fantasy output. SGA, I think, is just a little overpriced. DeJounte Murray, he is getting a lot of, Trae Young is getting a lot of love because of the matchup. And I think Murray is just super cheap for a game that has almost a 250 total and he can really, really get it done. Very good in transition, very good in high pace games, can do a lot, rebound the ball, assist, score, stocks, steals, blocks, whatnot. So I like the spot for Murray at 7,900 for a guy that does and can hit 60. He's done it a couple times, can definitely get into 50. And so I think he's a very interesting spot. I don't mind Trey, but I just like Murray's price better. And then one of my favorite pivots today so far, high price wise, is Tyrese Halliburton. Yes, it is against the Heat. Yes, there's, big time underdogs right now, they're only like 2.5 point. Yeah, only 2.5 point underdogs. But it's a 240 total. They're expected to score, versus the Heat. And the only way that's really going to happen is if Tyrese plays well. He is the center of their team. He has been absolutely crushing it lately. 28 points a game, over 10 assists a game. You can almost just count on a double-double from him at this point. And I don't mind the matchup. I am going to get to some Tyrese Halliburton. I'm, not getting to a crazy amount of him, but I'm absolutely trying to get to some if he's this low owned in one of the best game environments on the slate. And I think this game is kind of getting overlooked just because it's the Heat. And, the Heat always kind of get overlooked until somebody's out. And over on to DraftKings. Oh, this one switched. All right. And so the high-owned point guards, we got Emmanuel Quickley, Trae Young, and Shake Milton and Josh Giddey. So Trae Young, we talked about a little bit. I don't mind Trae whatsoever. I think he is in a very good spot. Super high total game. Last time there was a game, similarly total was this Pacers game that was like a 252 total. He went for 58 points. So high total games, not much defense is definitely the games that he excels in. And so I think he's a fine play. I wouldn't be trying to get off him, just also not trying to get more of him today. Shake Milton, who knows if he slides into the starting lineup or whatnot. He does probably get a couple extra minutes without Anthony Edwards, but I don't think he's going to get a ton of extra minutes. In my mind, I just think there's other places to go that are a little more interesting for the Timberwolves. Josh Giddey's fine. And let's get over to the matchup. So, Harden, point guard, best matchup on the slate. Point guards have been absolutely crushing the Warriors, so it does make sense to play him. I just do think he's a little too expensive on DraftKings. However, 50-point upside at 8K makes him interesting, so I get why you're going to play him. Curry looking like a very, very nice matchup versus the Clippers for him, so I definitely like Curry today. Sochan as well. One thing that needs to be mentioned about this is Wemby is questionable. Without him, Sochan looks way more interesting, but also there's much more likelihood of a blowout in this game. So I do like him. Garland, I think, is fine. Don't love him. And kind of my feeling about the rest of the guys here on the top of the matchups. Moving over to shooting guard. High-owned guys, we got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Gordon Hayward, Buddy Hield, and Mikal Bridges. So this is my thing about is I don't mind him. I just do not think his usage changes too much in the starting lineup. He may play a minute or two extra, but I don't think we're seeing a drastic minute difference or usage difference with him. He was 4,400 for a reason, and I don't think there's a huge uptick for me to want to play him. I'm going to play him a little bit, but not that much, and I would say definitely less than the field at this point. Gordon Hayward, I don't like that I like him. He's 5,600. His prices came down big time. He started the season, on a roll, has had a rough patch recently, but he's just a better player than what his price is right now. It isn't the easiest matchup in the world for him, but Hornets are going to have to knock down some shots and they have no ball. So scoring is going to have to come from somebody else. Maybe Gordon, Bridges, Rozier. Somebody will have to step up. And the price makes sense on Gordon. Buddy Hield, 5K is just still too cheap if he's still in the starting lineup and in one of the better game environments. Mikal Bridges, look, he's a 1.1 fantasy per minute guy in a very good matchup. So makes a lot of sense here. You also have brothers going against each other with Mikal and Miles Bridges, which, maybe they want to try a little bit harder and just show up their brother. I know if it was me, I definitely would want to. Next guys that I'm kind of interested in that are lower owned is Paul George. Look, he's in a decent matchup here versus the Warriors. It's higher scoring. It looks like it's a close game. Paul George has been mid-40s consistently lately, and we know he can go up to the 50s if he gets it rolling, and he's just been playing big-time minutes. One worry, he did play 40 minutes last night, so maybe they're a little bit tired, but at least, they didn't have to really travel too much due to the fact that it was in Sacramento. They literally drove an hour and they're there, so it's probably not much different for them driving home in LA. So I don't mind it. The one worry is that he played 40 minutes last night, but the guy has been playing 36, 38 minutes consistently. I think he'll be fine. I am interested at his price. DeJounte Murray, we talked about. Bogdan, got to talk about Bogdan. Bogdan's been playing pretty well lately. We know he has a nice ceiling when he really gets it rolling, and 248 total. I mean, you got to be kind of interested in this. The one thing I would say is that 6,100 is just getting up there, and I do worry a little bit that he doesn't have much ceiling at this price. So, I mean, if you can see, he's only hit 40 once, and I believe this was without Trey. So, that ceiling might not be there. That is my worry, and that's probably why he's not getting a little more ownership. And let's go over to shooting guard on DraftKings. We got Bogey, 6K. Same goes over here for him. Emmanuel Quickly and Nah. We've talked about all of them. We can talk more about Quickly. I don't think we really touched on him. But look, he's a very, very solid player. My worry is if this is a blowout, it is a 14.5 point spread. He is likely to get more affected a little bit more minutes-wise in a blowout than some other guys. So the way he really gets it done is when he's part of the closing lineup in a close game, and then his 24, 26 minutes become 30. If the game's not close, he's not getting up to 30 minutes. Now, he could be very efficient and get it done versus, a bad team, but that's what you need to happen, and super high owned, it's a little harder for me to believe that. All right, now Trey Brown, Shake Milton, I think both of them are interesting. I do have a little more interest in Troy Brown than any of them. I think the minutes are likely to be a little more for sure, and I think there's just a little more upside. He can shoot and he can play defense, which really adds value fantasy-wise. And shooting guard matchups. Branham, we didn't talk about him. I don't love his pricing. His pricing on DraftKings is a little more interesting. Don't mind getting there, but just don't love it. It is a super good game environment, though. Chicago Bulls, I'm glad Levine's here so we could talk about them. Him and DeRozan are questionable. If one of them is out, the other one's going to look very interesting. So we don't really know their status. They're getting blown out and both of them got hurt during the game and then taken out and never put back in. And it very well could have just been like, hey, we're getting blown out anyways. Why try and, push it? So we're going to be waiting on that injury news for a little while, probably for sure. Ivy, I don't really love. Robinson's Mac, good game environment, but I think his price is just kind of getting up there at 6,300 that I can't really do it. And that will do it there. So let's go on to small forward. Gordon Hayward, Buddy Hield, Bridges, we've talked about. George. Kyle Anderson is one we have not talked about yet. There's no Ant. His fantasy points per minute goes up drastically without Anthony Edwards, and he should be playing more minutes. So we did see a run of last year when he played more, started, was more involved, got the more usage, and he was playing very, very well. I think 28, 30 points, which, is right around our projection, is probably as low today. And there's real chances of pluses on top of that. So I'm very interested in Kyle Anderson. Troy Brown talked about a little bit. Bogey talked about Jimmy B. Jimmy Butler is just going totally overlooked. He is questionable, so we do have to watch that. But 239 total in a close game. I think you got to be interested in Jimmy Butler at 8,400 when it's really not that hard for him to get into 40 plus fantasy points and, even push 50. So I'm interested in him for sure. It is hard to play Butler during the regular season or the beginning of the regular season, though, just because he can be so nonchalant or non-caring about the regular season at times. And Draftkings got Kyle Anderson, Bogdanovich, as the high-owned guys. We have covered them all, so we will keep it moving to the matchups. Gordon Hayward, Chris Middleton, Bruce Brown, and Hunter are all on the top. Hayward is coming in too cheap on FanDuel. On DraftKings, 6,400 is kind of fair value for him. I would get to a little bit if I on DraftKings as well as FanDuel, but like him on FanDuel much better. But this is kind of why I don't like that I like him this today. Very good matchup for him. Small forwards have done very well versus Brooklyn, but he's just been bad lately. So one of those two things have to break today. And my guess is Hayward does, decently. And on to power forward. So we got Zach Collins, Draymond Green, Jarrett Allen, and slow-mo Kyle Anderson. Collins is very interesting to me today. If Wembanyama is out, I think Collins gets a big boost here. Not only do I think his minutes are a little more secure, I also think his usage goes up a little bit, and I would be extremely interested in Collins in that situation. As it is now, I'm okay. My issue is he just doesn't consistently get the minutes. You look at his last 5 games, 26, 28, 28, 30, 21. So I think there's a lot of downside risk to him. He is 6K and has been over 40 once. So I have some reservations about him, especially with him being high owned there. Draymond Green, 22% owned. Look, surprisingly, he played 33 minutes in his first game back. If I remember correctly, though, that game did go into overtime. I think you can really probably only count him on playing 28-ish minutes. Maybe 30. We have him for 30 right now. I personally don't think I would project him for that, so I might lower his projection a little bit, but he's in a good spot versus the Clippers. It's just, does he get the minutes or not? And I don't know if he really does. Chris Paul being out doesn't really benefit him that much, maybe slightly with a little more usage on the second team. But all in all, I don't love the spot for him. Jared Allen, I think, is fine. He could definitely torch the Trailblazers, but I just don't love it. It's, he's a inconsistent guy with a very big ceiling. Or actually, he's a consistent guy, consistent lower scoring player with a giant ceiling when he really gets it going. So if you can see, he's usually right around 30, which that's not even close to getting it done for DFS. But he has these big blow-up games every now and then. He did the same thing all last year, and I just have a hard time in this matchup wanting to go to that at high ownership. Wemby, I think, is in a really good spot. I will have a lot of him. The one thing with that is, he's questionable. The game's at 5. It's Popovich. We really have no idea what's going to go on there in his injury situation, minutes, all that. Karl Anthony Towns, he should be the chalkiest guy on the slate, in my opinion, or one of. I think that at 8,700, he is just way too cheap. If you go to this season and last season, take out Anthony Edwards, he's like a 1.45 per minute fantasy producer, and he's going to be playing 34, 35, 36 minutes maybe tonight. And at that, it's just 8,700. It's too cheap. He should probably be in the mid 9Ks. So I'm likely to get to a lot of Towns. I do expect his ownership to be higher than 13% though. And Jimmy B is showing up still. Moving on over to DraftKings. Naz Reid, Kyle Anderson, Sadiq Bey. Bey is in the game that we like. 5,500 is not too bad on DraftKings. Definitely have some interest. We haven't seen much of a ceiling out of him this year, though, and that is the one worry. Even in the high-paced game, he played 31 minutes versus Indiana and still only got 30. So at 5,500, he might be a little too expensive, but considering the matchup, I think you can absolutely consider Bey. Naz Reid, I mean, this dude can really produce some fantasy points, but it's just hard to count on any minutes. At high ownership, it's not something I want to count on. And let's move it on to the matchups here. Power forward matchups. Top is DFS. Karl Anthony Towns at second. Look at all of these fantasy points that all these guys have done. Durant 72, Durant 65, LeBron 40, Jeremy Grant 44, Ingram 47, Zion 44, Jackson 42. I think mid 40s is pretty much a lock for Towns, and he very, very easily could be mid 50s today. Randall's in a fine spot. Only issue there is 14 points spread. If for somehow the Pistons keep this a game into the fourth quarter, which they could, and that's why I don't like to talk blowouts, because you don't really know if a blowout's going to happen. It could be somewhat close into the mid fourth quarter, and then the Knicks just blow it out. And when that happens, the starters don't really lose minutes. So, or they do a little bit, but it's counteracted by the fact that they were more efficient, able to score more points. So I think Randall is interesting. He's obviously in a good matchup. They're going to score a lot of points. It's just, does he get there or not? And it largely depends on how that game script goes. It's kind of why I think that, doing like a 2-1 stack today is kind of interesting, like a game stack of 2-1, because if Detroit stays in it, it is likely, 2 Knicks or 2 Pistons and 1 Knick could be optimal, or on the other hand, one of the other games that is a little higher scoring and a big spread, like Milwaukee Bulls, same thing, 230 game total, 9-point spread. If the Bulls stay into this game late, then there's going to be one of those guys at least that come along with those Bucks players. So I think doing a little bit of a game stack kind of thing is a little interesting today. Now let's get over to the center. Let's wrap this up as quick as we can here. Zach Collins, Draymond, and Allen, we have all talked about Wemby, talked about Cat. I think Chet Holmgren is super interesting. Dude has been extremely good lately. 40 to 60 has been his range lately. And at 8,300, you got to consider that. So I think Chet is super interesting in one of the 5 o'clock games. And over on DraftKings, high owned, Reed, Capella, and Draymond. My one issue with Capella, I do like him today, but lately he's been splitting minutes with the backup center. And if he's not getting 26, 28 minutes, he's just not going to get you there. He can get you 30 points, but he's not going to get you the 40 plus, which he's capable of when he gets the minutes. So I do worry about that. If he gets the minutes, he's in a real nice spot. And Claxton's kind of interesting too in this spot. He's a real nice fantasy producer. And matchups, Ayton, Anthony Davis, and Robinson. Anthony Davis is just coming off a giant game yesterday. He's been balling the last week with a couple duds in there. If you're one of those trend guys, today is a downtrend game though, but it is a good spot in a high game total. So I expect AD to come prepared. So, all right, guys, that will do it for us today. Big time slate, 9 games, a lot to go over. Sorry it was a little longer than normal. You guys have a good one. Good luck. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye.